Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Semaphore Uncut, a podcast for developers about building great products. In this new episode, Darko, the podcast host, welcomes mkdev co-founders Pablo Iñigo Sánchez and Kirill Shirinkin. Pablo and Kirill will tackle the tech buzzwords, AI, LLMs, large language models, DevOps, and cloud lock-in to help us separate hype from business value. I hope you enjoy this new episode, and let's dive in.
Hi, Kirill. Hi, Pablo. Nice to see you guys again. Could you just please go ahead and introduce yourself?
So I'm Kirill. I'm the co-founder of mkdev, a cloud consultancy based in Germany.
I'm Pablo Iñigo, the other co-founder of mkdev. Okay, there is a third one, but he is not here these 2 days.
We have recently launched a CI/CD learning tool which shortcuts into everything you need to know to level up your CI/CD process and increase your productivity. Also, to ensure that all our customers get the best CI/CD guidance, we have improved our sign-up process. From now on, everyone who's considering using Semaphore will get personalized CI/CD expert guidance from day one. Our engineers have more than 10 years of experience, so you'll surely be in good hands. Check it out on our website, semaphoreCI.com.
Can you give us a brief history of mkdev?
We started as a B2C product, a platform to teach people programming. So I used to be, as I said, a backend developer with Ruby and Rails primarily. And I started teaching other people with Ruby and Rails and then built this platform that slowly evolved to have more and more tutors to teach other people. mkdev existed like this, and the brand around mkdev, the visual style, was born around this B2C area. But due to different political events, the economical events, etc., the B2C part slowly became unreasonable to maintain further. And around 3 years ago or so, we basically decided, okay, we'd rather do B2B and we'd rather just become a consultancy and help companies instead of being a training business. And we switched to DevOps consultancy and cloud, which it is right now.
Can you guys speak a bit how your client base evolves and what kind of companies are you guys working with?
What we started is always to work with companies that they wanted to have a DevOps team, they want to have a DevOps architecture, or they want to have an audit, but always everything was related to DevOps, you know? And when I say DevOps, it's infra. I said, for example, I want to have an architect, I want to have a team of people who is going to do that. But since the last months, everyone now is asking about the AI. But okay, we create a new line, a new division that is for AI, because at the end, we started as a infra company, but at the end, most of the companies, they want to have something related to AI. And it's something that we are. You discover these days that most of the people, they don't know what they want, or they don't know what they can get, but they are asking for something that they don't know what is going to be the result. These days, when they talk about something different, they don't know what is the result, and then it's more or less the chaotic part that is happening at the end of this year.
AI element, what you're presenting, is going to stay around for a long time, and is not a hype. It's here and it's to stay, but many things are not defined, and people are just don't know what's the first step, I guess.
I understand perfectly what you say, because I think in the same way. Not everyone understands what they are talking about. You know, we have a head of AI in our company, and when I talk with him, it's something like, you say, "Come on, please. What you think that you know is nothing when you hear him talking about that." You know, because he's a person who has been working with AI for many years, and he knows what he's talking about. And it's the same. For example, another example, maybe not so dramatic, but microservices. It was another example when everything needs to be microservices.
Yeah.
Why? But what's that? I don't know.
In technology, there are those journeys where something originates as an open source thing, and then there are commercial products around them. And sometimes it's the other way around. How do you guys see that evolution? Open source tooling for AI and all of that versus those commercial companies and so on?
I think the presentation from Amazon, what they're doing right now. So they have a product called Amazon Bedrock, which basically does not try to be a ChatGPT replacement. They do what Amazon is good with. They offer a cloud service that makes using LLMs really easy. But essentially, Bedrock is a wrapper around 5-6 different models. So Amazon realizes that it cannot be that only one company, OpenAI, is responsible for AI, for the LLM progress. And they say, okay, there are actually some open source models. There are some models from Meta. There are models from Amazon. So they're trying already to kind of give this choice and allow to select between different models and fine-tune them. Like one of the features they just announced is that now you can fine-tune like the Llama model and the Titan model directly. It probably will move into this direction on any cloud provider except Azure, because they will offer not only their own models, but a really easy way to use open source models.
Yeah.
There are some models that are public, so then everyone can get, and even you can make your own. But the difference here is, if you want to go to this specific NLP connected to an LLM, this natural language, like how it is GPT-4, the problem is that today they are the winner. And the question is, do you need this model? Yes or no? Because in AWS, demonstrate that it's not needed in every case. And AWS demonstrated, like Vertex AI, with many other examples, that this is not needed, But I think that today, many companies, they want to have GPT because it's there. Is what we're talking, no? I need this huge model that is the best one today, and even you can do everything today because you can connect an agent, you can do now this new connection, even in OpenAI in the web. I think that when you are giving a unit, you're giving a reason to be there, a model, is when it's something good. And you don't need to use GPT, you don't need to use Llama, you need to use the one that is the best. And these cases that AWS are doing, I think are fantastic because are giving business cases to something that today is only cool. But when you are offering directly and only in 2 clicks a business case, is what when you are offering to the customer a good thing. And I think that this is where everyone, all the companies needs to move in this direction. We need to find a good business case to use these LLM, these large models with this natural language programming. So this way to understand when you write, when you talk to this language and to give something good. Because to have a chat, we have ChatGPT.
In that realm of like integrating, what's your maybe just hunch in that realm? Big public clouds versus the on-prem use case?
What makes GPT-4 so great is that they spent how long? Like 6 months, 1 year training it with data. So it's a great model. We don't know if that's the best model, but that's for sure the model that got the most training and the most material pumped into it over a long period of time. And that's something probably harder to reproduce with untrained open source model on premise.
Yeah.
Because the problem is the money. Because imagine that you go on-prem and you want to create your own model.
I'm not saying that model has to be created on-prem, but maybe just utilized.
Utilized can be, you can have some GPUs, because this is something else that you need to have, because you need to have an amount of GPUs, because at the end, this is the business of the cloud providers, no?
Yeah. And in terms of, the DevOps realm, when we are speaking about that, the things that come to mind are, the architecture of the network, of the servers and so on, Terraform, Ansible, all the other tooling in that realm. And when we speak about this AI and all of those topics, are there some things that you guys are thinking how those are, potentially connecting, converging, or do they have like a points where they cross or they don't cross yet? So
when I talk to you, your brain is able to understand that what I tell him, maybe there is a word hiding in my other words, and then you're able to understand that. And this is the magic of this natural language. And this is how it's working. So now imagine that you have, for example, a natural language that is connected to a number of agents, that is able to execute a number of things with a programming model that is able to understand many, many cases, because it has been training with many, many cases. A job like a DevOps guy can be substituted by a model. For sure that then there will be people coding and preparing models and doing different things, for sure. But I said that this work that you do once and another and another and another, because how many times you type code in Terraform in different companies? Next one. Okay, I'm going to create now this component. Now I'm going to create this component. It's something that is repeated and repeated and repeated. And this kind of process that is not, I am not painting. It's like maybe the people is not watching the paint that you have in your back, Darko. But to do that, you need to be an artist. But this is something that is repeated and repeated. And for me, I think that this kind of, infra can be this deployment of this infra can be easily replaced by an autonomous component that is talking to a model that is executing a number of agents.
There are more and more great use cases for AI now in the DevOps area. One of the good ones that has nothing to do with GPT is in observability, and what, for example, the Datadog and New Relic, similar tools are doing, is that you don't need to define alarms anymore. You just say, tell me if something bad happens. One of the new features in case of Amazon they added is that instead of writing queries for your logs, you just explain what you want to find in plain English, and then they build you a query in their language. So I think for enhancing your day-to-day work is amazing. Something I personally use every day to also generate Terraform code, even though actually for DevOps kind of code like YAMLs and HashiCorp language is not so good. It just, I see that writing a Python script with GitHub Copilot or GPT-4 is extremely easy. It just does fantastic job. Writing Terraform code, it just uses all the outdated stuff. It's not aware of the new things. It just, the new information is not inside the model yet, but that's something that will be fixed. The point where I disagree with Pablo is with this, that if you do something lots of times, then GPT or language model is the solution for this. That's not how infrastructure evolved right over the last 10 years, because the way it evolved is that we build better and better abstractions of infrastructure, and we abstract away more and more things ourselves. What actually replaces lots of the things people do as DevOps engineers are more and more of better and better abstractions on top of infrastructure, and not AI, because in the end there is someone with this creative mind who thinks about how to build better abstractions.
We have recently launched a CI/CD learning tool which shortcuts into everything you need to know to level up your CI/CD process and increase your productivity. Also, to ensure that all our customers get the best CI/CD guidance, we have improved our sign-up process. From now on, everyone who's considering using Semaphore will get personalized CI/CD expert guidance from day one. Our engineers have more than 10 years of experience, so you'll surely be in good hands. Check it out on our website, semaphoreCI.com.
Where do you guys see Kubernetes as a default platform from your day-to-day data that you are seeing and experience? Are these cloud-specific abstractions gaining more and more tractions compared to Kubernetes, or Kubernetes is still...
Okay, I think that you can use things like Cloud Run in Google Cloud, Container App in Azure, but at the end, Kubernetes is Kubernetes, and everything depends. The good thing is that these days, if you want to deploy something little and you only want to have some kind of front end, automatically you can go to, imagine, Cloud Run, that is one of the best, or at least one of the first one, or Container App that you have in Azure. It's boom. That's all. You have your code, you have the container, you build the image, and after that, in seconds, you have the application deploy with auto-scaling, plus you have an endpoint there. But as soon as you want to jump from this simplicity and you want to go to something in containers, that is, you need to start to do something above, for sure that you need Kubernetes. It's something that is there, it's something that is, I think it's not going to be disappear for at least for the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Because I think Kubernetes as a way to run containers, as a way to optimize container resources is the most horrible thing in the cloud, because it just adds another layer of maintaining CPU and memory. So you have a scheduler on top of EC2 in case of Amazon, or on top of the compute engine. For this, I think Kubernetes just should not exist as a solution in the cloud, because that's not where the power of Kubernetes is. Where the power of Kubernetes is that it's like with Ruby on Rails. When you go to any Ruby on Rails application, you know where to find everything. They're all the same.
How big is the vendor lock-in? How big of a problem? How much are customers, maybe your customers, paying attention to that?
It depends on the person. Like, there are people for whom it's really important. The discussion about vendor lock-in is more theoretical than something practical that happens to many companies.
I've been in some migration from AWS or from Azure to Google Cloud. And really, those happen because first, Google Cloud pay a lot of money, because there is no other way to do that. So the idea is that during the first years, I'm going to give you everything for free, and even you only pay the engineers to do the migration. These days is what Kirill says. As soon as you go to the cloud, it's like an octopus. They introduce AIM, they introduce this other component, this other, and you are captured by this octopus, and it's super difficult to live out of this octopus, because he's going to eat you.
But it's also a very good business to sell the other direction, right? Because the alternative is that let's go full cloud-native open standards way, and then next day you have Istio running just to do some simple networking, and you have something like crossplane and more complex open source technologies, because you don't want to be vendor locked in, but now you're locked in into CNCF organization and army of consultants and courses and everything built around this. So and then it's another vendor lock-in, just you locked into open way of doing things or open standards way.
In terms of how these, just commercial stories around, vendors and around, clients need to invest their money and bet on something essentially. How is that influencing tooling and what you guys are seeing? Maybe in just, let's say, these last 3 or last couple of years. Is evolution something that is bringing, major changes, or how do you guys see that?
Depends of the company, depends if this is a startup or not. Normally, the biggest companies are super conservative. So I say conservative in the technology that they use. If they go to one technology, they stick with this technology for years. Little companies, they can change easily because even it's super dynamic for them. There is not so many process around. So then in a startup, it's simple to change from one technology to another. But at the end, what happened normally in the big companies is that they see what is the benefit and what is the complication and what is the amount of money that they should spend on. For sure that the cloud providers bring new technologies, bring new components, but more or less, there are changes, but more or less everything has been the same.
What I see from many cloud providers and vendors is they try to consolidate and simplify. And again, from Amazon side, they have the wonderful open source tool called AWS Copilot because they figured they have many, many ways to run containers. So they just abstracted everything away with the single open source CLI tool, making use of everything they released before.
How do guys internally, the company, manage the hype cycles?
Try to show the customers that they don't need it. One of the examples we actually can share publicly because we have, and it's about Service Mesh, because we have a series of videos that we created together with Allianz about Service Mesh. And the idea was that, okay, before you start using Service Mesh, let's just evaluate it. Like, let's look at technology, which service meshes out there exist, which requirements you have, and then just verify if it works or not. And then, once you start comparing different service meshes, you see that some of them are just a monster, another one uses service mesh just to sound fancy. And then when you start configuring some of them, you find so many issues just on the proof of concept stage that then it's easy for a customer to see, well, probably we should not use it. My personal stance is always like I'm trying to be as conservative as possible and not fight innovation, but to always ask like why. Because in the end, yes, the tool is cool, like Service Mesh is amazing. It's also durability, but you need to know why for your single monolithic application you need the Service Mesh, why it's required.
Yeah. If you are 10, 20 or even 50 people company, you don't need what Netflix needs or what Google needs or what other, huge organizations need.
What is moving the companies is the fear. And the fear is coming not down to up, it's coming up to down. So the CEO of the company at the end in the huge company is not the owner of the company. Is there because there is a board who is telling you're there and you can be fired. Then the next step is the CTO. Imagine I telling the next step, but okay, on the same line could be the CTO. And it's the same. He has fear because he talked with another CTOs and he understands that what is happening around and he think, okay, I need to do that. Imagine the case of Service Mesh. Okay, I need to use that. Why? No, I don't know, but okay, I've been in many conferences. I hear a lot of people telling we are using Service Mesh and wow, I need to use Service Mesh. I have fear because I don't want to make a mistake. Then you can go down, imagine, to the head of infra, and it's the same because then the CEO says to the CTO, says to the head of, and then at the end, nobody wants to make a mistake. The problem in this kind of business that you don't see in other businesses, for example, you send to the company, imagine 20 people of the company to some conferences, and those guys in the conferences, they start to hear about something called, let's talk about Service Mesh because it's the topic that we said here. Imagine everyone start to hear about Service Mesh, and then these 20 people goes to the company and start to talk about Service Mesh, and it's something that is spread around, and then this spread go up, and then even the people who is up, the C-level, goes to another conference and start to hear about the same thing. So at the end, there is something like a bubble of people talking about Service Mesh. So then it's clear we need Service Mesh. So now we need to create a case. We need to create a business case where to use Service Mesh. The technology create the business case, and it's not in the other way around that you have a business case and you need to find the technology, and in the other way around you need to use that the path. But the problem is when there are so many voices talking up and down about something that you need to go to this direction.
And it works bottom up as well, right? Because Service Mesh is probably a big example, but many tools. It's just individual contributors, they read blogs and newsletters and they're like, oh, Pulumi is the most important thing now for infrastructure. Let's rewrite all of our Terraform in Pulumi. And I would be this kind of person as well, like some years ago. Like I just slowly became more conservative. But sometimes you just need to wait, right? And not to get this fear of missing out. Because if I'm still waiting for Pulumi, in this particular case, to become popular enough to start caring about it, because there was this explosion in popularity, then there was nothing. Then there was another spike because of license change. But and then if you look at what customers use, what job description specify, Pulumi is maybe 0.5% and Terraform is 99%.
Going forward, if you guys can maybe give us like a draft of your next team next year, and what are the things that you guys are bootstrapping? What are some of the next steps that you guys are taking there? And for people who are interested in hearing more, how they can find about it?
So we are with our infra team, as always, we are growing these teams, and working in these components, because at the end, this is the root of mkdev, and this is what we are since beginning, cloud infra, and this is what we are. We are creating, that is already created, this division for AI and data, not only AI, so, it's AI, data, machine learning, And then we are working to check if we can create a new division about the security for the 2024. This is our three pillars, because at the end, the thing is when you are in one customer, you discover that if you only offer to this customer, imagine you're a supermarket and you only offer bread, but they want to have onions and they want to have carrot and you said, why am I only going to sell to you bread if I am, but the problem is that if you have no idea about the other thing in the supermarket, you need to learn.
And for people who want to learn more about your stuff, you guys have a podcast. We can definitely link to that. I also saw, I think a couple of days ago, that Pablo is doing some webinars or something like that. So
it's a GCP webinar. It's about Cloud Run. And the idea of the webinar is explain how you can interconnect with Cloud Run with internally or externally with a database, because there are different ways to do that. Even now, there is a new that I was thinking to do an update of this webinar, because there is a new way to do that with Cloud Run directly. So, but when you have a Cloud Run, you need to think how is working the VPCs inside Google Cloud, and you need to use components like a VPC serverless, because, you need to talk internally through the Google network. So, and the idea of this webinar is to explain with exercise how this is working to everyone in the, and anyways, it's a free webinar, so it's not a paid webinar, so you can join.
Besides that, we have a YouTube channel. We publish every Monday a new video, and Pablo publishes lots of AI videos. Some of videos are also DevOps related. And we have a bi-weekly newsletter, DevOps mkdev Dispatch, where we just share everything that we created, plus an intro from one of the three co-founders in every episode.
Amazing. And maybe lastly, it's mkdev.com or
me. mkdev.me.
mkdev.me. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. It was great talking to you and exploring all these interesting, some of them controversial subjects and topics in our wild industry. Good luck in 2024.
Thank you, Darko. It was a pleasure, like always.
Thank you.
What a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Make sure to subscribe to Semaphore Uncut on your podcast player of choice so that you don't miss our new episodes. And stay tuned.